Yeah, I want to check in with Kim about finding a time I could.
We saw his latest.
Could you do something in the morning?
Yeah, weekday morning.
Yeah, okay. That's where I'm probably going to go to.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. Now, the most important person is here. We can get started.
Publicity.
All right, it's 4:30. This is a posted meeting of the Water Quality Management Committee. We have several items on the agenda. We have several items that will make it onto a future agenda. The first item on the agenda is an update on the watershed permit, notice of intent application. Amy Lowell, Scott McCann, myself, and Kristen have met, I guess, 2.5 times now. But we've got it set up so that we're meeting on a weekly basis to put together stuff around the notice of intent, which fundamentally is a schedule, but we're actually working on what are the steps that we've got to do so that the schedule we put out there will be a logical schedule. And we've also reached the conclusion that we're not going to do 14 watershed permits. We're going to do basically 4 notices of intent and group them together. But one of the things we've been doing as we've marched along here, I say we, but it's mostly Kristen's been doing it. We've been looking at where we're sewered and where we think we're sewering, and then the open question has always been, how do you get to the point where you've got enough nitrogen removed from the system? So that was, we've started to map, we've kind of gone ahead of just the notice of intent step into what areas we might be considering to either expand the sewer service area or to designate for IA technologies. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I mean, you said pretty much everything I was going to say.
I just wanted to frame what we've been doing.
So basically what Steve said is this is hopefully just going to be a brief update of what we've been covering the last couple weeks. The first part is evaluating that potential grouping for the watersheds, like Steve said. So we don't have 14 individual permits. So we're looking at factors like, does the watershed have a CWMP already prepared and approved? Is it a shared watershed where it needs an intermunicipal agreement between towns? Is it a watershed where there's been major implementation or the Sentinel Station is meeting its target threshold concentration at the Sentinel Station? So we're looking at what makes sense of how to group these for timing purposes. So then the next step, for the notice of intent application, we need the schedule of when we would be planning to submit the application for the permit itself. So again, taking those same factors into consideration, but also looking on the tail end, the reporting requirements, because there's a 5-year reporting requirement. So staggering when we apply so it staggers when reports are due. So those are the 2 things at the top of the list we've been doing, and we've also been evaluating where we think we're sewering, where we think we might have other implementations. And historically, we've looked at the estuaries from the broad perspective of the total nitrogen that needs to be removed from the watershed as a whole. The MEP and the TMDL, when you go into the reports, they break it out by sub-watershed. So now we're starting to take, one step closer look at where these implementations may be going and whether it matches with the goals needed outlined in that document. So just for a quick example, this is one of the tables from the MEP. This is for Bourne's Pond. You can see it's got the 3 sub-watersheds for Bourne's Pond. Their present loading conditions, which are 15 to 20 years old, and the thresholds for each of those sub-watersheds. So that's where we're looking at the individual removal requirements, and then as the watershed as a whole. So when we're looking at individual plans, what we've done is we've taken those plans and we've overlaid it for the town. So it says draft across it because this is a very, very barely scratched the surface conceptual idea. So the area in teal, this is areas that are presently sewered. This magenta colored, pink, these are the planned sewer areas that have been identified in the CWMP or have consistently come up in the discussions as areas that we're fairly certain we want to sewer down the line. What these dark blue areas are these are potential areas where septic improvements need to occur. And this is based on the nitrogen removal requirements for the sub-watersheds. Why these areas are in these places for this first pass, that's as close to the actual estuary as we can get, so you'd be able to see your impacts soonest. If we start looking further up in the estuary with your time of travel, till you see implementations, may take a while. So there's a balance. But for the initial planning exercise, it's looking at the water use in these areas the same way we would do for sewering to see how many parcels, which parcels, where would need updates. For this, for the preliminary calculations, that was done using septic performing at 10 milligrams per liter, which is consistent with the DEP regulations for best available nitrogen reduction technology. So that does not mean that the blue sections would be IA mandates. They could be potential sewer expansion areas. They could be best available nitrogen reducing technology areas. They could be nothing as the plan goes across. But what this is showing is the extent of the additional nitrogen removal needed in the areas based on those MEP numbers. So that's the south coast and lower Buzzards Bay, and this is the upper portion of Buzzards Bay, so Wild Harbor, Fiddlers, Rance Canal, and Megansett. So along with this, as I said, initially it's done for as close to the actual estuary as possible, but we acknowledge that there are other surface water resources in the nitrogen-sensitive areas. So even less evaluated. Oh, let me back up. So on those maps in total, the septic areas, the septic improvement areas, there's about 3,300 parcels in that. That's developed and undeveloped parcels. So there's been no evaluation done how many of those are actually developed. And in the potential sewer areas, those pink areas, there's about 5,300 parcels. So back to the other surface water resources in these nitrogen-sensitive areas. Another thing we want to start to look at down the line is to evaluate the give and take of where implementations could occur to see if there's other potential benefits we could achieve in the upper watershed. So maybe moving some of those areas where you could benefit some of the freshwater bodies. So this is a map that was produced by Town GIS, and it has a 300-foot boundary for the freshwater ponds and coastal ponds as well. So that's just a starting place. Again, none of these have been evaluated for developed versus undeveloped, but it is something that we are considering and have been discussing as these meetings progress. And that's all I have.
Just you leave it on for a second. Just to frame this a little bit, if you recall when the watershed permit stuff first came up, we were looking at 13,000 parcels that if the town did nothing or didn't come up with a plan or do notice of intent, would be subject to putting IAs in over a fairly short window of time. We've said quite clearly every time that we talk about what we're going that we're going to have some IAs. And this was a first pass at the scale of what that might be. Again, you're using the 10. The town's regulation is currently 12, so depending upon when it goes into effect or not, the number of parcels may increase a little bit. There's roughly 22,000 parcels in town. We're talking at the end of the day, 9,000 parcels between sewer and some form of IA are potentially impacted. We put this one together, Kim, by and large, the Board of Health has been wrestling with a potential regulation of 300 feet back from bodies of water, ponds or estuaries, modeling that after similar regulations that have gone through in Wareham and Marion, I think. So again, they've not done that, but we just wanted to see, the number of possibly impacted homes or parcels. Again, just getting something working rather than some areas will need it. We want to start being a little more definitive, because I know, realtors and others are telling people on sale of property now that, the town may or may not implement or do something. It's just trying to give a little bit of a sense of the bound. I always like to work on boundary conditions, how big or how many or how frequent might happen. So, we'll keep working on this. And then, the last thing I want to say is, the way we've been laying this out, Amy hasn't picked the date or time, but we're going to come back to the Board of Selectmen with the timelines for the 4 notice of intents we're going to do, so people understand stepwise when we're going to come to town meeting for some funding to get it done, and dates and times for things to happen. And we did sort of work around the reality of the latest urine diversion stuff, that, we need several years of good data to get that into the mix of approved IA alternatives. So, the dates and times they don't perfectly line up, but they're not so skewed that that it's a fatal flaw any place in what we're trying to do.
Can I ask a nitpicking technical curiosity question? Is the reason that the outer boundary of the orange areas is so irregular because the big plots
Parcels are, yeah.
extend a long way past the 300? So
It's the
if any
parcel.
part of a parcel is within 300 feet, the whole parcel is up there.
Easiest thing on GIS right now is to say any parcel within X feet of a water body, make it this color, okay?
Right.
So if
When you
something
go
was
to
subdivided, it
evaluate,
would
you
change.
could look and say, all right, only 25% of the parcel is in, does that count?
Right.
But, when you look at the ponds that string up through the central portion of Falmouth, by and large, you can study it a little bit. The 300 foot is,
Yeah, you can see.
you can see.
I'm happy you're doing this.
Other comments, questions?
Yeah, two, a little bit farther into the weeds. Kristen, of course, we've got lots of old numbers for nitrogen loading. Have you done any build-out estimate numbers to,
No, that will all come in the watershed permit.
Okay.
Preparation. We kind of took a half step forward.
Okay.
Because there's been this big unanswered question, which is how many parcels might have to get something beyond the areas we already thought we were gonna
we're
serve.
crawling before we walk, and I'm happy with that. I just wondered,
This is
wanted to
the
make sure.
present load.
And the other thing is, and this is even a little farther into the weeds, do we have any sort of progress line of what IA systems are in the midst of being evaluated, and a timeline when some of the good ones, the suitable ones, would be available?
Sounds like an excellent topic to put on a future agenda.
Okay.
Perhaps invite somebody from the
Good,
Mass.
I know you
Center
did
back and
a
give
report
them-
about 6 months ago, it seems to me, or maybe longer.
Longer.
Time flies when we're having fun. But anyway, yeah, I was gonna just suggest it would be really nice for us to know where we are in the IA development cycle.
Yep,
Okay.
so noted. Thank you.
My memory tells me there was somewhere mid-year, some report that stated, I think 2 of the watersheds were now showing water quality had improved so much that they met the standards.
Correct.
And we were going to be, as a board or as a town, asking the state, how do we get them off the list? Or at least one of them off the list.
We believe that what's happened now, okay, is for every watershed, there has to be a watershed permit. Now, the watershed permit that gets put together might say, we're achieving the value at the Sentinel Station, we're going to measure it every year, we're gonna give a report every 5 years and tell you that it's still good.
Okay.
And if it deteriorates, here's our plan, how to address that.
So the 2 that are out there is Quistit Harbor and McGansett.
Yep.
Those are the 2. McGansett, a couple little nuances to that one, but at the Sentinel Station makes it. You happy?
Sure.
Any comments from the audience?
You got my question on the last one. Steve asked my same question.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Next item on the agenda, our inestimable director, deputy director from the Marine and Environmental Science, Chuck. Thank you for asking to come in and talk to us.
Sure, thank you very much.
Ramp up.
Yep, Chuck Martinson with the Department of Marine and Environment. I wanted to just see if we could give a quick update to the committee just on where we're at with the development of the public and private municipal aquaculture kind of development that we've been working on. The committee's been very much involved with our department over the last 8 or 9 years, doing demonstration farms, ramping up kind of the abilities that we have to produce large amounts of shellfish, both at the municipal level and at the public-private partnership level. The department was invited. I know that there was, I believe, a joint meeting with the advisory committee and the Board of Selectmen, but as a result of that, we were invited by the town manager to present the full-scale initial plan to the Board of Selectmen. We really highlighted a lot of our successes, and we reviewed the work and the partnership that we have had with the committee as well. We really heard a strong desire from the Board of Selectmen that they wanted us to move forward on a very large-scale level with the shellfish piece. So, we found that very exciting. Kind of a couple action items that we're looking at in the next the next 6 months, I would say. We're going to need to extend the demonstration projects that we currently have right now. They expire this year. There's 3 demonstration projects, as you might recall, in Eel River. Those have all been very successful operations. They're fully operational now. Every year the town receives from each one of those individual plots about $19,600 renting gear from the town, which ultimately covers the cost of the program. So we look to continue those contracts. They're working well. I would rather just have them continue on for a bit longer than kind of go backwards. I'd like to kind of move forward, and I don't want to get caught too much in the weeds with redoing contracts. The next piece also is we are working with the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Buckley. Sheriff Buckley has put us in touch with her staff, and we are exploring the option of actually having an entire pod up at the Barnstable County House of Correction just designated for gear building. And our goal was to work, we started pre-COVID working with the female inmate population up there. It was really the first time that the female inmate population had been brought into the fold as far as community service and kind of doing some of the training aspects of it. So we visited up there. We toured the pod. A pod, they have a number. I don't know if, I assume no one in front of me has been in there, but they have pods
Never know.
that are, they'll hold, say, 40 or 50 people each, and you can actually move people among, into a separate pod, so you can set up a whole area for gear development. So that's really exciting for us because it really kind of has a space in there that we can actually do all this development possibly inside. Now that there's kind of a few other pieces there. We've agreed to do some educational work on our end with the facility. So we have had a very long-standing partnership, which started with Sheriff Cummings, and I'm excited to kind of see that keep going with Sheriff Buckley. The second part is we've worked very closely with Upper Cape Tech Regional, and they're with us. They're with us twice this week. They're with us all the time. They actually received some grant money as well on their end. Which some of the grant money they've determined they want to go to the projects that we're working together on with them. So there'll be some synergy there with some relatively small level funding, probably $50,000 to $100,000 of funding. But it is a nice add-on and certainly can kind of enrich the educational experience with the high school students as well. So I guess, where we're at right now is it's really just not one department, one committee working on it. We're really kind of stretching this out to make it a full kind of a community operation, as it has been up to this point. How many farms are we looking at? We're looking at very upper end, maybe 70 farms, and that's not 70 private farms. That's 70 farms in total. I think realistically, probably like 35 to 70 is what we're looking at. We did that first phase where we came in and we basically did a rough assessment of an area. We went in, we did test plots. You know, if it was an area that say it was 400 feet by 400 feet, we would go out there and do 25 digs. We would check the bottom suitability, and if it kind of met that initial criteria, we would send it, swipe right and send it down the trail. Keep it, hold it. There are enough in that queue to at least get 35 new farms out of that. And again, in those 35, we're looking at things like scallop farms in places like Little Pond where you cannot grow other shellfish in there. We're looking at, or you can grow other shellfish in there, but not for market. We're looking at seed farms in areas where they would go from a seed area to an adult area. We're also looking at opportunities where the town could potentially also be involved with providing seed to other communities. We currently do that with oysters. We sell oysters to other communities, which that money revolves right back into the account. So I think here what I'm trying to get across is that it's not just, everyone just thinks like, all right, maybe it's just the plots that we have in Eel River. It's really so much more than that. It includes significant more production of cohogs as well for our commercial diggers. There's quite a bit to that. As far as what we're talking about money-wise, we heard from the Board of Selectmen they really wanted to see kind of two pieces moving forward. The first piece would be a direct environmental impact report, and this would be an initial $300,000 to $400,000 investment. And that would deal with the engineering, the planning, and we've decided to bundle all of it together instead of piecemeal do it. So it will be a one-hit, deal with it all at once, a really intensive surveying and permitting piece. The follow-along to that would be the money piece that would actually fund the gear, the rental gear, the gear that we would be using to get the program off the ground and running. We've used this model before at a very, 4% level, 3% level with the Eel River projects. It was very successful. We have received the funds back into there over the last 3 years, renting the gear out. So it's really a matter of just replicability and magnitude at this point, I believe. As far as timing, everyone this is like the slide that I think everyone wants to see. It's like, when's this going to happen? Everyone wants to know when farms be available and everything else. I put this together yesterday, and just, this is a rough time frame. I think it's relatively accurate though. Looking at full build out like 2029, somewhere in there. There's really 25, 50, 75, 100% phased implementation. That is not phased permitting though, single level permitting. Other things that could hold this up, yes. Other things that could go a little quicker, yeah. I mean, if we have, say, the facility and they're building, significant amounts of gear and they can produce large amounts of gear, that could potentially speed up implementation. But there are some sieves in there, such as the permitting piece and everything else. We put out a solicitation before for grants. It was a competitive solicitation. I believe that worked very well. I think that we might revisit a couple things in there, but overall, I like the structure of it. I think it's worked well. As far as kind of moving forward with that method, I think that that's something that has been very successful to us up to this point. As far as the project is concerned, we're looking at about a 5-year return to cover those initial development costs once we're fully operational. So be making back roughly about $1 million a year. You look at the gear, it's usually like life of the gear, 7 to 10 years. I think the takeaway here is also, which I really didn't include this in the slide as well, but it is, first of all, there's a lot of flexibility here, so that if we do find out that, yeah, we are producing farms, but we don't have the farmers for some reason to farm them, we can slow down on that rollout. And also, you know, one of the really kind of big pieces to this is that, and it really goes understated a lot of times, is we really have a seafood deficit on Cape Cod. We bring in a lot more seafood than we put out. So this is really kind of getting at a much larger picture issue, which is exciting. It's, you know, we're taking a need and we're able to really kind of mix it together with some stuff and come out with some really good product on the other end. I didn't want to get too far into the weeds. I know you kind of just probably wanted a quick snapshot. Hopefully I was able to do that. I'm more than happy to take questions if there's any.
Good. My big question is, what can this board do
Sure.
to help support your project?
Yeah, I mean, the board has already done so much over the last number of years. I think, you know, we'll just be in touch with the board as we have been up to this point. The Board of Selectmen, you know, Water Quality Management Committee, amazing. I think one thing that has been critical to us is working with science wares has been very helpful to get some of the stuff done that's never really been done before. You know, it's not a matter, it's a, you know, there's a lot of wheels out there, and this is a wheel that hasn't been invented yet. We're really kind of forging forward. So, you know, from an engineering perspective, it really does take, we've had, that's an issue right there. And it has worked up to this point, and a large part of that has been the work also of science wares. So I just want to put that out there. I think they're very supportive.
I would note for those that are in attendance that you already have a history of working with the correctional staff.
Correct. Yeah.
On this program. They helped to build the upwell, as I recall?
Yeah, so they started with the upwellers back at Falmouth Harbor. They did that entire program over there, and that developed further into a number of different things after that. Deploying farms, retrieving farms, putting shellfish away for the winter, an educational piece that we worked on. It's really been kind of endless. I mean, it's one of the more rewarding pieces to the job, actually. It's a lot of pride there, you know, with the work getting done. We've had, you know, kind of a couple inmates come back afterward with their families, and I always tell them, hey, man, when you get out of here, come back and show them what you did, you know, and they took me up on it. So it's good stuff, yeah. So
I'm going to defer to Tom first, because Tom's been there, Tom and...
Yeah, Chuck, I can't remember how much nitrogen was removed last year just by the 3 pilot plots. Do you remember? Or maybe
I
Kristen knows?
can get you the numbers. I don't off the top.
Yeah,
of
I
my
can't
head.
remember either, but it was a,
It hit the target, and I think one exceeded it
Yep.
pretty well. One was borderline.
Yeah, so there's, as far as like volume on those, the minimum is 280 pieces of shellfish that need to be produced. Anything over that, the grower is not charged for each piece produced with the gear used. So they're incentivized to actually do more than that. And we had one grower that was like roughly 30% higher than that.
well, I think it was more than that. I think,
is.
was it Matt that hit 445,000?
Yeah, I forget the exact number. It was just.
Yeah, he
blew it out
almost
of the
doubled.
water.
It was like 80% over the target
Yeah.
in terms of number of shellfish.
So.
Steve?
Just to give us a feel for it, if and when you arrive at 35 new farms, in terms of acres, what is that as a multiple of what you have now? I mean, are you doubling times 10?
Oh no, it's probably. I mean, at this point, it's probably a multiple of 15 to 20 times what we have right now.
Yeah, when you were in the front of the selectmen, you talked 200 acres.
Yeah,
You-
we're talking-
You looked to develop 200 usable acres.
Yeah, it kind of, you know, so it's all a function of really what will be allowed and won't be allowed by the Division of Marine Fisheries, right? And so if we're growing with seed, we will be able to, you know, we're using seed in these areas, not adult animals. We have a lot, our ability to do things is a lot greater.
So I just wanted a rough idea. I don't know whether it was
Yeah.
10% or times 100.
Yeah, it's significant, it is. And I mean, it really, I think, if you think in terms of communities like Wellfleet and Duxbury and those other communities, this is really the piece that will, you know, Falmouth will be one of those mainstay players after this. This will put us over the line. We are very heavy on the science end of things. We're very heavy on the municipal end of things. But as far as like a town that, as a whole, produces a lot of shellfish, this is I would say that this is something that will get us over that. And it will, I think that it will really, if it's successful, it will really, kind of define some of the future of this community.
And a related question, are several or many of your existing farmers eager to take on a substantial part of this, or are you going to have to find a lot of new farmers?
I hear from the current farmers that we have now. I hear from people who were not selected last time. I mean, I got 2 phone calls today from people that weren't selected the last time to say, "Oh, if we were on the list last time, do we go to the top of the list now?" I mean, I've heard from farmers from outside of the community. I've heard from current farmers who are inside the community but not part of this program that want to be part of this program. There's definitely there's a buzz for sure. And I don't think we're going to have issues finding people to grow.
Other board members? Okay. Audience? Go ahead, Doug.
I guess you're gonna need some more upwelders then, right?
Yeah, a couple.
There's,
So that's been part of the planning, is siting those. There would be, we would look to have quite a few more at the marina and a few other locations as well. Yep, absolutely.
one more.
Sure.
You mentioned that we don't produce enough seafood and shellfish here on the Cape. Do you have any idea the percentage that we are told that we import?
Total shellfish or total fish, right? I don't, but there is a general deficit in New England. It's it's pretty literature's out there from NOAA on that. So, or not NOAA, but Fed Fisheries. So, all right, thank you very much,
Well,
everyone.
thank you for that update.
Thank you,
That's
Chuck.
very informative. Next item on our agenda is, we got a scope back from SMAS for them to look at the comments received from the Buzzards Bay Coalition on the Herringbrook report to respond. Amy, do you want to summarize the scope? And or cost, I mean, you're funding that out of a budget item, right?
The operating budget,
Yeah.
because it's not a lot of money. Amy Lowell, wastewater superintendent. We asked the SMAS team to provide a proposal to respond to the letter that was sent to the Water Quality Management Committee and the Select Board by the Buzzards Bay Coalition, and address the comments there. So we got a brief scope back to write a response letter, and I think Steve was soliciting feedback on moving forward with that.
Yeah, just, part of it is making everybody aware of that. And do we have a sense of how long they're going to need to put together the responses?
A month or less.
Yeah, yeah. So probably, maybe when you're talking with them, maybe if 2 months from now, we can, couple of meetings from now, if we can have that back, then we can come back and have a conversation about where they're at, the comment letters from the Buzzards Bay Coalition and whatnot.
Yep. Yep, there is a part of the, I asked to include in the scope coming to one of these meetings to speak to the group about it.
Any comments or questions to Amy?
I will say that his letter says that his response will be within 3 weeks from the time he's told it's been funded, so,
I gave him an extra week
yeah.
in my answer to you.
Right, so, tentatively, I'm looking at, not the next meeting, but the meeting after that.
Right, that's what I think.
That we'd have them in here on the agenda.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to see how this lined up with the articles and the letters going out to the town meeting members.
That's why I would like to have people come back in before we go into town meeting, so it's an October discussion.
Okay. So we'll know their response before that meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the goal is to get feedback soon so we can have a full discussion.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure. Tom Walrath, Precinct Captain, Precinct 3. Question on the letter that Buzzards Bay Coalition sent. So they talk about the CMAS report is based on false assumptions, so we're trying to gather something. Have we gone back to them and asked about Dr. Craig Tobias from UConn and Are they sharing his information with us?
We've not done that. We got their comment letter. We reached back to the original author to say, we got this comment letter. Buzzards Bay Coalition has chosen to push for deleting certain key language in the town meeting article. The one public comment I'll make at this time is, in order to get SRF financing to build the sewers, which is a 0% loan, and you get a pretty substantial amount of financial benefit because they pay the contractor as he goes forward, and the loan starts when the work is finished. You have to have a report that's been written that identifies where the sewage is going to go to and be treated, and where it's going to be disposed of. And at the present time, what we have is beds in West Falmouth. We're working diligently on an outfall, but we don't have an outfall, so we can't tell them it's going to an outfall until we have an outfall. So we'll be prepared to talk more about that, you know, in the timelines of various things that are happening. Okay? Okay.
Just to respond, the coalition's letter included Dr. Mathias's review. All of his review was included in the coalition's comment letter. So the committee does have it.
Yep. It's out there. Thank you. Any other comments? All right. I've lost track of who's got the revised letters. You, Tom? Are you the author? Who's the author at this point?
I'll claim authorship.
Well, John has reauthored it, not reauthorized, but reauthored it. So
Yeah,
we'll
so
see
I-
what he wants to do with it, I guess.
No,
Let me
yeah,
jump in.
Let me backtrack here, just for the record. So, last time around, we had a letter, there were several comments, and we said, let's kick it back into the cycle. If you have things that you want to revise or change, you know, work them through Kristen or whatnot. A couple of you did offer some insights. But John, you felt that one part was maybe too much and another part needed to be added, so.
So I apologize, I wasn't here for the last meeting, so I didn't have the benefit of being able to throw my oar in. It did seem to me, and what I've given you is that couple of sentences added to the second paragraph, where I think we need to make it really apparent to town meeting members that it's critical, how critical the ability to discharge into beds 14 and 15 is. Without that ability, we will not have access to the state revolving zero-interest loan program. So that's the purpose of those two sentences that I've inserted. The other thing that I would suggest, and the committee can take it as they see, the third paragraph in the draft, the last draft, there are a bunch of those that
I have a couple, if you want.
Yeah, I would like to see.
The person in the room is most interested in what we're going to say.
I would like to see one.
This is still in term.
Yeah, he's proposing some language.
It's up to you.
But it looks like that's not.
the second suggestion that I would like to make to the board is the third paragraph in the draft basically was, I thought, fear-mongering. In other words, it's saying to the town meeting members, if we don't develop watershed permits, the state has mandated that we're going to have to massively IA the entire town. And it seemed to me we've already made that decision. We're going to be going to the state with a series of watershed permits. So I don't see that we need to bang on the town meeting members about, boy, if we don't do the watershed permits, we're going to be in trouble. Because I think we've already crossed that threshold. Those are the two things, so.
Just polling the board members are comfortable with the changes, or?
Well, excuse me, to John's last comment, you know, I think when the select board said, you know, we're going this route, I believe it was the chairman, who said, you know, it's important that we emphasize to town meeting and to the entire community that we must do this, and if we don't, this is the hammer that's over our head. So I think we should leave that in, because it doesn't hurt to remind folks, you know, if this article fails again, it's like, okay, now what the hang are we gonna do? And if we tell the state we're going to implement plans and that we're developing plans, and yet we've got a plan already, and we're not implementing it, I think it damages our credibility. I think people have to be aware of the impact of not proceeding, and the impact is extremely severe. And it's not this committee or the Board of Selectmen saying to people, thou shalt IA, it is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that can't be emphasized enough to people, the impact of the decisions that are going to be made going forward. As John said, you know, just in general, not just in this letter, we are fully committed, as is the select board, to proceeding as fast as possible with an outfall pipe. But that is, you know, the complex permitting issue. We're looking to get funding at town meeting to engineer it and start preliminary testing, but that program may take 5 years, it may take 7, it may take 10. We don't know. We're optimistically hoping for about a 7-year time frame. But I think the decision to be made in November is really important, that we show our credibility and that we proceed with the plan. Everything goes great, we won't even need to do it, but we better be ready to do it, and hopefully if we have to do it, it'll only be for a couple of years. So, the other thing that I think we might want to mention, we talked the third paragraph down, or fourth, whatever, the request for $1.4 million for outfall permitting and testing and whatever. Won't that article be reduced, or that line item, by the $540 already approved by selectmen from the Air Force Center?
Well, but in total, that's the amount
Yes.
that the town is, maybe we need to just clean that line up, so it indicates that the town.
There's still a net to be coming out of town funds, but $500,000 and change, 540,000, I think.
That's a good pickup. Go ahead.
Yeah, I sent a follow-up comment to that effect, that the total is 1.4, but 550,000 was approved by the select board from AFSI nutrient management funds. So what's going to be in the capital request, and it's part of the capital budget in the warrant book, is $850,000, the remainder of that 1.4.
Steve?
I agree with what Ed just said, which means I agree with John's first suggestion, but not with his second one.
Okay, good.
I think that's what that means.
Tom?
Yeah, that's where I am too. I don't think it hurts to leave that little bit of extra stuff in, because, as Ed has already emphasized, we're under the gun here. We're not just sitting here deciding what we should do.
And also, in the second paragraph, where John inserted these two good sentences as the second and third sentence, I just think that, and maybe John's already fixed this.
It's already fixed.
Yes, that depending on which version you have, and John is agreeing with me, those two should be moved to the end of that paragraph. Otherwise,
You know what he's talking about.
The other one.
weird.
Your yellow copy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so some people had an earlier, okay.
Okay, so we're working from the one with the yellow highlighting.
Yes.
Yeah, everything got
Yes,
distributed at the
fine.
time the agenda was
Fine.
prepared.
So that,
But
yeah.
between the time the agenda got prepared and now, John wants to sort of go through a revision here in front of the board.
Somebody spilled some yellow water on it, Ed.
I'm assuming there are no other changes in this version.
Nope.
No.
So the only other change will be a phrase after the 1.4 million,
To clarify
with
that.
$540,000
550?
will come from the AFSI.
550.
550?
I was off by 10 grand.
Okay.
Jordan?
I guess I feel like we should leave the IA background in. I feel like there's probably a way to make it less
Well, keep it-
fear-mongering-esque,
Yeah,
but
Keep in mind,
given
we're trying to
the,
get to a point where we've got a letter.
Yeah.
We all know what's in the letter. We get it out to the town meeting members, and then there's the anticipated follow-up. Did you get the letter? Did you read the letter? Is there any part of it you don't understand or whatever? So that, again, we'll have a presentation, town meeting floor, but
No.
I was comfortable with the revision around the clarification on the SRF. I thought that was valuable.
Yes.
I'll defer to the wishes of the board. John, you okay? You want to make an argument to still?
No,
Okay.
I will fold my tent on that.
Are you the principal author, Tom?
I guess I still am, but I was just going to, are we asking for a formal endorsement right now of the letter?
I'd like to
A work in
move this along.
progress?
I'd like to move it from a work in progress to this is our letter.
Well, we can talk about how it might be changed farther down the line, but anyway, I'll move that we accept it as presented initially, but with John's additional material as presented in the last draft that I've seen.
So we're accepting
And the
this
five.
version with the yellow as
Yes.
is.
Well, no,
No.
We're not.
no,
Except for
putting
the
back-
550, yes.
No,
No.
we're putting back the paragraph I
putting
deleted.
back the other paragraph,
He
the one
deleted a
about
paragraph.
IAs.
Good.
So that's my motion, and I'll wait for a second.
Second.
Okay,
Because your motion included the 550 about the,
yep.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah,
yeah.
we want that change
We're taking,
also.
we're taking the letter that was distributed with the agenda.
Yes.
We're making an addition around the SRF funding, and we are revising the description of the money for the outfall,
Yes,
okay? That's basically what the motion is.
And
That's my motion.
reinserting the paragraph I deleted.
No, I start off with, we go to the letter that was distributed
Okay.
with the agenda,
yeah,
okay?
From which it had not been removed.
yeah, and I'll accept that as my motion.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion by the board? Okay. We have an audience member that would like to comment. For the record, I do identify yourself.
Okay, thank you,
Will the
Mr.
mic
Chair.
pick it up? Will the mic pick it up?
Do you want me to come up?
Probably should if it's going to be significant.
Thank you. You sit in this seat more than I do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Corin Peterson with the Buzzards Bay Coalition. I'm the Vice President of Clean Water Advocacy. I'm also an attorney. Please don't throw tomatoes yet. So a question for the committee. In your statement about jeopardizing SRF funding, am I incorrect that this article is going for the engineering and design of the collection system?
It's going for engineering, design, and permitting.
Okay, but it's the engineering, design, and permitting. It is not construction.
Not construction.
Does we need to come back to town meeting in order to fund construction?
Yes.
Is there any reason why we can't strip out the permitting language for this article and not jeopardize SRF funding, because we have to come back to town meeting anyways for the SRF funding for construction?
If somebody wants to stand up on the town meeting floor and make an amendment, we'll see where it goes.
Okay, so it actually doesn't jeopardize SRF funding if you strip that out at this point?
Jeopardizing the permitting.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Why would you strip out the permitting?
You strip out the permitting in order to move forward, which the coalition absolutely supports moving forward with the design of the collection system for the T-ticket neighborhood. Permitting would allow the town to indefinitely discharge into beds 14 and 15, which is a risk to Crocker Pond and Herringbrook. The coalition does not believe you need that as a discharge. We don't support moving forward with that discharge. We actually think the outfall can get permitted and constructed on the same time frame as if you were going to discharge to beds 14 and 15. So we don't think you need it.
I'll say that you've sent the letter to everybody. I think we all understand your position.
Okay.
Okay?
I just wanted to address the SRF issue.
Amy?
I think it jeopardizes our SRF position because the SRF process is begins early. And in order to, we would have, the plan now is to request the funds for design and permitting, then do the design and permitting. We plan now to request construction funds in April of 2024. And request, then we would apply for the SRF loan in October of 2024 and go out to bid in the beginning of 2025. So with that timing, there is not time to separate out the design and permitting of the discharge from the design and permitting of the collection system, or the design of the collection system. There will certainly, and the SRF, the whole SRF timeframe, it's a 1 year, you get this one opportunity a year to apply, and if you don't meet that October deadline, then you wait a year to apply the following year. And that's a significant risk for this project and a significant delay.
Amy, well, you're still up there. When you do the SRF application, do believe you have to identify that the project is in accordance with a comprehensive wastewater management plan that's been reviewed and approved by the state.
Yes.
And that a time certain by which all necessary permits will be applied for and/or in hand.
Yeah, and you need to, so this plan has been approved by the state, our targeted watershed management plan for Great Pond, which includes this collection system and this discharge site, has been approved by the state. But there are many, many things that SRF looks to see, and one of them is the verification that you have the ability to use the sites that you're proposing. So if you're proposing lift station sites, you need to have access to those lift station sites. If you're proposing a discharge, you need to have control over those discharge sites. We need a discharge plan. The SRF, I guarantee that SRF would not fund a collection system design without a place to discharge the treated wastewater that would come from that area.
Amy, a question. Aren't elements of the design reliant on the permitting process as well?
Yes. Well, aren't parts of the design reliant on the permitting process? Yes.
It's sort of intertwined.
Yes. So for the discharge site, right, what we'd be doing through the discharge permitting and design is very closely related, in that we'd be doing soil borings in the discharge area and proving to the DEP the area that would be needed for the discharge that we're proposing. Despite the fact that this process I just laid out takes the next year and a half or so, it would still be quite a number of years, say no sooner than 2027, before any additional discharge would actually end up at those beds. You're going to cut me off.
We're going into the whole conversation that I'm trying to move to
Okay.
a couple meetings from now.
Okay.
You know,
Got it.
Okay. So Tom, you'll.
Yeah, John and I have had a
So,
little mini
all those in
conference.
favor of the motion made and as amended? Aye. Okay. Yeah, get that cleaned up, and if that letter winds up in your office, can you print enough copies? Yeah, or somebody in the DPW, okay? So when you make those small corrections, send it to me and Amy.
Yep.
And then catch up with me, Amy, and we'll work out.
Right. Now, what about our Hancocking, as John refers to it? Do we personally sign these things, or just go out over our names?
Take one of the sheets, pass it around, and I'll scan it.
Yeah,
And we'll get Ken's signature at some point. Tom, if you take it and get Ken's signature, when he's not
What if I
contagious.
misspell his name?
no.
We don't have it all in the old one, it's all on one sheet.
Yeah, take one that's all on one sheet.
Yeah, just pass it
Okay, I
around.
don't have that one.
The old one was on one sheet.
Yeah,
Did you
I don't
print
think
the old
anybody
one?
printed the old one.
It
We
doesn't
didn't
matter,
print that
anyone
sheet
will
'cause we
work.
weren't editing
Once
that sheet.
Kristen has all the signatures, she can do what she
I've
wants.
got it.
You gotta get the old one.
So Steve, what do you think the timing of sending this letter out is?
Good question.
Okay.
You're next. Well, you use your own pen. While that's going around, the next item on the agenda is the FY 2023 Water Quality Management Committee Annual Report. That was due on the 22nd and got submitted. Diane Davidson, at this point here, it's more informational. It's very similar to what we put out each year. We make some small edits, identifying who's on the board and off the board when we meet, type thing. But on that, it's a pretty general summary. Unless anybody's got questions on that, I don't think we need to necessarily approve the annual report. But, okay,
I thought we always did.
so I'll accept the motion to approve the annual report as written.
We already did. It was really just to distribute the finalized version that got
Okay, we did
submitted
get the
after
vote
the
before.
edits.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
thank you. That was just
voted last
distributed.
time.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda. Annually, we authorize an expenditure for the Science Wares contract.
Do you want me to leave?
It's coming back, it hasn't signed it yet.
No,
Okay.
Said it came back.
okay. Is there any, I guess maybe, Kristen, just describe what the 78,000 covers. It's all your duties.
Well, so last year, the 3-year Science Wares contract was renewed, but only the first year of funding was approved from Article 17. The committee decided rather than slating what was remaining in Article 17 all in one shot, that it was gonna be an annual renewal.
Right.
So that covers my diligent minute skills and everything else I do in the background. And sitting out and sampling the PRB when it's cold and snowy.
Yeah, and we've always managed to stay within the budget. So,
Right,
So-
it's business as usual.
okay, so I'll accept the motion to,
So moved.
Also move.
Second.
had a motion made and seconded to authorize expenditure of not to exceed 78,000 for 2024 from the 3-year contract. Any discussion?
Just for my own education as the newbie, what is the source of that
So,
fund?
a long time ago, Article 17 appropriated money for a lot of things, okay? Inlet widening and everything else. And so it's coming out of that fund. those funds.
So it's part of the annual town budget line item?
No, it's actually an article from a long time ago for doing 2011, for doing PRBs, doing aquaculture pilot programs, looking at composting toilets and
So
everything.
some of money was appropriated at that point, and we continue to spend that down?
So a reasonable question is, when does it run out?
Right. My next question.
Well, that's a little hard to say, and I'll just do this. There's $5-something million sitting there.
Still.
When are we gonna run out of money in this Article 17? We're still sitting here waiting for the Army Corps of Engineers to say that we can do inlet widening. Go ahead.
Article 17 has approximately left in it what we have allocated for the ScienceWare contract. So there's not,
For 1 year.
no,
no,
for
the
the,
3
for the
years.
3
3
years
years,
that was last authorized, or last contracted. The budget you're thinking of is Article 28 of April 2014, and that was a construction appropriation that included the Bournes Pond Inlet widening. And that remainder in Article 28 is allocated for Bournes Pond Inlet widening only. Does that answer your question?
So this Article 17 money runs out when?
When,
If
yeah,
you renew for
in FY 25.
2025 for Science Wares, that'll probably be the end of the fund.
FY
And
25.
the thought is then we go to town meeting and ask for another bunch of money.
Yeah.
Yes, you would need to if you want to continue the services of an outside consultant or any of the other things that have been done with that money over time. The original article was for wastewater planning and for a number of pilot projects that were envisioned at the same time. And the committee hired a consultant, ScienceWares, to assist with implementation. So this is the final 3 years of that service are covered under that article.
Yeah. A year from now, we either have to get it worked into Amy's budget going forward, or we have to do a separate article.
So if we wait till then that also means that we can't give out little pieces to Chuck Martinson or whatever for studies and so on. We've allocated all of it as of this vote.
No,
No, one more year.
one more year, so that means there's about 78,000 after this vote. So right now, about 150,000, because it would cover the next 2 years. Because we're only through 1 year of that 3-year contract.
But Steve, you're correct that fairly soon, the ongoing costs of doing things will need to be addressed and rolled up into something, okay? But for this year, we're going after the hard money for doing the outfall work, okay? Not trying to get a continuing resolution for.
No, I was just trying to, yes, and I was just trying to clarify that whether it was true that no one need apply for small grants from us
Well, we're gonna,
or not.
at the last meeting, we voted to go to the, I always say AFC, the AFC funds to do some additional sampling of the PRBs. So there's still a small amount of AFC money sitting there.
I can get back to you on exactly what's left under Article 17. It won't be zero. ScienceWares hasn't always spent up to their not to exceed limit, but it's small amounts that would be left. The two sources of funds that the committee has relied on to do all the pilots and all the support are the Article 17 of April 2011 and the AFC Nutrient Mitigation Fund. And we just talked about Article 17. AFC Nutrient Mitigation Fund is down to $100 and something thousand now as well. So there is a little bit of money left there, but not much.
I think that's great. I think it would be totally appropriate, inasmuch as we're sort of a board of directors for this money. If we don't know how much there is, something doesn't compute, right? I mean, so it would be good to see that on a piece of paper.
Maybe time to consider whether or not you want to recommend something for an operating budget too, for ongoing.
Yeah, part of the conversation is, we're an advisory, I see us as an advisory board to the selectmen. Amy runs a town department. ScienceWare invoices get paid by Amy. They come before, used to come before Eric, now I've discovered they come before me to say, did Kristen show up at the 4 meetings and do any work? So that's where I touched upon. It might make sense, particularly going forward with the watershed stuff and all the monitoring that's going to happen under that. Who does that? How does that get paid for? And does the operating budget for the wastewater move a little bit? Kim,
Can I ask a question? Kim Comar, Falmouth Pond Coalition.
you need to go to the microphone.
Okay.
If it's a big question.
Yeah. So I sent a letter today to Ed and Tom and copied Steve and some other people regarding possible phase 1 of the urine diversion pilot project. And just listening to this discussion and Ed's question, my understanding is that $500,000 was allocated towards the urine diversion pilot project in Article 17. $190,000 of that was spent. $310,000 of it remained unspent. So this conversation I'm listening to, it seems to me that some of this money is probably the $310,000 that was not spent on the urine diversion project. And I would just ask that maybe as Amy is getting figures for you, that maybe she could look into this. I would request that she look into this and see how much money of the $500,000, what was spent and what was not spent. It would be helpful to know that.
So I'm going to just try a little correction on this, okay? Article 17 as written was a lump sum appropriation. And the basis for the lump sum was a buildup of expected expenditures by certain categories, Kim. They weren't, if the thing had $500,000 looking around the composting effort over time, and back then there was some thought about where that would go. Once the composting thing did not go forward, money was not reserved for composting.
I understand.
So for you to say there's $310,000 there,
No, I'm just saying that my understanding is that 500,000 was earmarked for that project and
when you use the phrase
190,000.
earmarked,
So
when
what
you
I'm asking is that, Amy, if you could find out how much of the 500,000, or how much was spent on the composting
Yeah.
toilet initiative at the time?
Didn't you just say?
I'm just interested in confirming that.
okay, yeah, we can confirm, we can confirm how money was spent under Article 17.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure it was broadly written so that it could be used for a wide variety of things. Right.
I mean, you know, and just to fill the gap in here, after the composting toilet didn't take off the way a lot of people felt it would, we got a little bit deeper into the PRB and the aquaculture. And so, I think if you go back, you look at what they might have had for, you know, initial basis of developing that expenditure and compared, you know, by different categories, what's been spent and whatnot, you can follow the money. Okay. Do we take a vote? We had a motion. I think we're in discussion. So all those in favor of authorizing an expenditure of up to $78,000 for 2024, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Reports of members and staff.
Why are you looking at me?
I don't know, I'm starting,
He's just being nice.
I'm left-handed. I turned over here. and-
I guess I could start and say, you know, we have formed a urine diversion subcommittee to study that specific technology, to see how a program could be structured that would provide useful data under state regulations from the Plumbing Board and also DEP that would meet their guidelines and provide data that is useful to us and DEP going forward to hopefully get some credit for urine diversion installations at selected households toward our TMDL goals. That's the mission of the committee. The subcommittee has been tasked to, okay, define that. How would we do it? What would be included? What would not be included? The committee's hoping to meet within the next week or so as a group. Been kind of caucusing and sending out information on various and sundry old research projects on a worldwide basis. And I, myself, with Kristen's help, I get a 25-pound box of the old records from that program back in 2011, 2012, the original eco toilet thing. So I've spent a bunch of hours weeding through that thing and finding a lot of interesting data. The unfortunate thing was, of course, the program really didn't get to the end result that people were hoping for. In looking at the original description of the program and the RFP that was sent out by Ray Jack and Jerry Patamus for the program, the goals are the same as what we're talking about now. So we're, you know, and what I didn't want to do was reinvent the wheel. So going back into that history bucket, I found, yeah, we're on the verge of that. So let's learn from that history. And also I'm trying to learn from the worldwide experience. And DEP asked us to submit, and I know Kristen's been working on this, any data on urine diversion in this country or anywhere that can give them something to hang their hat on and say, we're going to not even do a pilot, we're going right to a conditional approval project. It will be approved as a
Demonstration. From pilot to
demonstration.
demonstration.
Under the IA law, let's call it, the regulations that govern IA trials and testing. So that's what we're proceeding with. Some of the data came from, you know, I located some stuff in Australia that was very specific on areas similar to what we're looking at. And they looked at a number of technologies, but specifically urine diversion. And again, the results were less than stellar. In fact, after several years of testing and gathering urine and trying to use it on turf farms, which when I first read that, I said, wow, what a great idea, turf farms. And there's a big bunch of them just down the state line in Rhode Island that maybe could use this stuff. It didn't work. They found that the urine collected was so dilute that it was costing a prohibitive number to use on the fields. The turf farm in the area in Australia agreed to try it, and they found it corroded the heck out of their equipment, peeled the paint right off the sprayers. It's highly caustic. But they tried it. They found the costs of, because it was so dilute, the urine's nice as it first exits the human body, but if you use a little bit of water, as the toilets they use to flush it, you're now very dilute, and then you add in other stuff along the way. By the time it got to the fields, they had a number that it cost to use commercial fertilizer per hectare, $20 per application. Urine from, when they called it yellow water, cost $500 versus $20. So they abandoned the project. They ripped out the urine diversion toilets. They'd installed 30 of them in 23 households and replaced them with conventional toilets. So that's an experience. Is it going to happen here? I hope not. I think I've got a lot better optimism for our success, but it teaches you some of the faults that other people have made along the way. So that's where we're at. Going to gather this subcommittee together. There's Tom and myself from this committee and 3 members of the community, and I guess I could name them. Doug Brown has offered to be part of this.
Thank you, Doug.
Matt Patrick, who volunteered at one of these meetings and was part of that initial study and part of water quality management, and George, I'll try to say his name right, Huffelder, who's Barnstable County and also is on the Board of Health, I believe. And he was also part of that initial process that Falmouth undertook back in 2011, 2012 timeframe. So it's a great bunch of knowledge and experience. I think, Doug, you were part of water quality back then, too, if I'm not mistaken.
I had been, I had moved on from that.
Okay.
I volunteered to go around with the composting toilet salesman and do the carpentry evaluations and some of the planning for it and proposal, cost estimates for the homeowners.
You may want to step to the microphone, because I'm not sure you're making it on TV. Well, I mean, he's providing, he's doing a fill-in,
I was on the original Comprehensive Wastewater Plan Review Committee, which now is morphed into this group. And then I realized it was more of a job for people with more of a scientific background. I'm a carpenter. But I did volunteer to be on the team that was going around to the houses looking at the possibility of installing the composting toilets. We didn't really look into urine diverting toilets because I don't think we were really aware of the technology. I don't think it was come as far as it has. So hopefully we'll have more success with this round.
Thank you. Yeah, there were, in that 7 or 8 people who actually participated, there were 2 households that used urine diversion as part or all of their installation. But again, the data was, very limited. It did kind of verify some of the things that Kristen had in her analysis of the potential for urine diversion as a method to reduce nitrogen. The Australian experience, their data did indicate that taking out anywhere 40 to 56% of the nitrogen that normally would go to a sewer treatment plant. But a big issue that we would have going forward as a subcommittee is, well, not really, I say that, but if it increased in scale, if the numbers in the test of 50 households proved it's worthwhile, and then let's say it expanded to 1,000 or 2 installations in Falmouth, what do you do with that urine? Does it go to Amy's plant to be tested? Is there an agricultural impact? And there is a whole raft of science, and you can spend days just looking at reports that look at the pros and cons of that, and the technical difficulties, the health issues. It's mind-boggling. I've been in the weeds.
It's good. Your committee's got a lot of ground to cover, right?
Yes, that's enough said.
It's a good summary.
It can always go to the plant. At least we'll get it out of the ground.
Yeah.
Well, and then we centrally treat it, and if there's pharmaceutical issues, if there's PFAS issues, what better place to treat it than in a central spot instead of having it trickle through septic systems out into the estuaries again? So, that's the beauty of a central collection system. You can take care of engineer take advantage of the new science of treating some of these things. And that's just evolving almost daily. There's a lot of exciting stuff, a lot of interesting stuff, but your head does tend to spin after a while.
Next time I'm gonna start at this end.
Now that we've used up all our time.
No, it's good. I mean, you're clearly engaged in it. I wanted to be sure that you had found other members of your committee.
Yes.
Which is good. I'm gonna go to the far end. What do we know about stormwater?
I don't have any more updates on the
No more updates.
stormwater.
Nobody
other
showed up
than
with the $500,000.
We have a contract in place to work on McCoy Bay Landing in the spring to get to 25% designs.
Nice.
No additional info.
That's good.
I was going to split very fine hair with, and I prefer the term working group because subcommittee sounds.
Yeah, it's a working, no, subcommittee. Okay, yeah,
So much to learn, so
And
little
going
time.
forward, we can refer to Mr. Brown as a recovering water quality management committee.
John?
Nothing else. I've
Nothing
been
else,
working
John?
with
Got
Ed.
anything you?
May I ask Amy a question based on what Ed just said?
Yes, you may ask Amy a question based upon what Ed just said.
Can your plant handle this specialized septage, I guess I could call it, that's high in nitrogen and low in carbon without screwing up your chemistry? Or I should say, how much of it
Yes.
can you handle?
Yes, at small volumes. If it were going to be large scale, certainly from the pilot, I would not be concerned about it.
50 or 100 is
but-
no problem.
Yeah, from the pilot, I'm not concerned about it. If we were going to scale it up, then I would be concerned about it.
Thank you.
If we were going to scale it up, we'd need to evaluate that.
I think, we covered stuff already about the watershed permit notice of intent. Nothing to report on the outfall because we're waiting to go to town meeting. Maybe at some point, John, you and I should put our heads together to figure what we will have available, should there be comments or questions on the outfall off the capital budget, okay? So,
I did have one question to Amy. Did we get a second eelgrass survey from Scott Gallagher this summer?
No, we decided to defer that to after, that's part of this next article, is additional eelgrass survey.
all right.
Can I ask a question on the outfall working group or whatever? Select Board authorized the 550 of funds. Or can we start spending that now? Are we spending that now to move the process as quickly as possible?
So I think technically we could, but we're close enough to town meeting, and the way we've got the big chunk is going to be for doing the marine borings. And it's unlikely you could do the marine borings for the amount of money that we have available. Okay? So more so than anything else, we need the marine borings. The other studies are all seasonally dependent, as Amy just said, that they kick off at a different time, so.
I would just make one other statement on that topic, that the Falmouth Heights Mira Vista Association, of which I am a member, and Steve and John were at the annual meeting. I did not attend myself for personal reasons, but at that meeting, the presentation went very well. A lot of questions were asked, and what I just received this week from the association, so that went out to the 400-plus members of the association, was an excellent summary of what the questions were and the answers that were given. So it was getting a lot of distribution to that community, and, it was a very positive, hey, here were all the great responses to all the important questions that were asked. And I think, it's just worth mentioning that a community that was expected to be in opposition of this is really coming on board with it, and to the extent the association's pulling behind it, due to the efforts of Steve and John.
Well, everybody who's been working on it. I will say this, I was always an optimist. I mean, I know enough people from the Heights. I know that they're citizens of Falmouth. I know that they have the interests of the town, You know, they had to put up with the sewer construction coming in, and that was a disruption. But I didn't feel like what we were coming to them was arbitrary, number one. And that B, it would benefit their community, because they're making wastewater now into the system, as well as the entire community. You know, our goal is, if there's a question, we'll get an answer.
Yep, and it's working, so I think that's.
We did offer that we'd come back at some point with progress updates, probably after we get the borings contract together and whatnot. We'll see where we're sitting at, okay? Okay, we've gotten to the most important thing of the evening. Tom, are you happy with the minutes?
Yeah, I guess Kristen's not happy with me because I did much more slicing and dicing this time than usual, but.
He doesn't like my English.
I like what's out there, I think, and Kristen hasn't had anything else since I sent the last draft to her, so.
Does anybody have any comments on the minutes that require editing or correction? Jordan?
I just had one that I don't know whether or not you caught, which is the spelling of Brian Horsley's last name.
Where
I
were you
didn't
on
do
that, Tom?
That was the paragraph inserted about the meeting.
Oh, sentence.
This is under number 2,
Yep.
that Brian had attended the
Yep.
meeting with DEP, and you spell Horsley Witten correctly later.
Right, I see that, yeah.
But it's
See, I
just
didn't-
the E and the L are
That wasn't
reversed.
in what I got.
It wasn't, it
That
was added after.
Oh, okay.
So I have to be naive.
That was my only note.
Okay,
Very
thanks.
good point.
Do I have a motion to accept the minutes with the
Spelling correction?
correction as noted on the spelling?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion made and seconded. Any further comment by the public? Gods that be. All those in favor of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
With one abstention, because I wasn't here.
Yes.
Thank you, John. Does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn, or, I mean, I
I'll
try
do
to
so.
get the meeting done in 2 hours. We've got 30, 40 minutes we could kill.
Yeah, I'll also move.
Okay. Do I have a second on the motion?
Second.
Okay. Let's talk about the meeting dates in October, sorry, before we vote on the motion to adjourn, okay? Meeting dates for October, staying in this room. I'd like to propose Wednesday, the 11th, 4:30, and Wednesday, the 25th, at 4:30. And unless there's an objection, that Kristen will send out.
I already sent out
She
calendar.
already sent it out.
Oh, good. I should open up my computer one of these days, see what's in
Right.
it.
The 11th, I'll be absent.
Okay.
Okay, so motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.